You are listening to Girls, Ghosts, Ghouls, a podcast where three women discuss horror movies from the silent era through the 1970s. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Spotify, and Anchor. Timely, topical, terrifying. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Girls, Ghosts, Ghouls, and it is spooky season. It is October. Hopefully I will actually get this out to you in October, but if you don't, you can forgive me. But it being October, we wanted to return to Universal Monsters, the classics. And what is more classic than the 1931 Bela Lugosi Dracula? So if you have never seen a Dracula movie, and where have you been? And what are you doing with your life if you haven't? Here's a little plot summary. Transylvanian vampire Count Dracula bends a naive real estate agent to his will, then takes up residence at a London estate where he sleeps in his coffin by day and searches for potential victims by night. And with that, we're just going to go and talk about why we love this and why when we watched it, we're kind of like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Truly.
One of the things that caught me from the beginning, and this pretty much carries out through the whole film, is their long sweeping shots with no dialogue. It's a very quiet movie. Also, because it doesn't have a soundtrack, and I can come back to that later, but this is one of those films, especially given the transition from silent films to talking films, happened in the late 20s, 26 to 30 thereabouts. It's one of the films you can really see the influence still of the silent pictures. That this was made by somebody who had complete experience within that realm. And Todd Browning, the director, that was where a lot of his experience came from, is in the silent films. It's very visual. You really have to pay attention to the screen, I think, with this movie. You can't get along with just kind of half-ass listening to the dialogue.
Yeah, I agree. I think they were very much reliant on the atmospheric impact, if you will, more than they were on anything else, like beyond the dialogue, beyond, and yeah, no suspenseful music tracks. There's just like opening credit music and I think a closing credit music sort of thing. And that's it on the version I watched. So yeah, lighting, they relied a lot on lighting and intense close-ups. But yeah, no like dun dun duns or in the jaws like done it, nothing like that.
Facial expression and gesture seem to play such a grand role in this film.
I do kind of wonder what it would have been like with a soundtrack, because there were moments, keeping in mind that I love this film, but watching it, there were moments when I'm like, is this scary? And I'm like, I know that it probably was at the time because it was just new. It was novel. It's really credited as being one of the first like talking horror movies, and it started a new genre. And that's amazing. But I wonder if it had had a score to tell me like this is very menacing. I would have gotten it better. Which sounds stupid, but really, is it that there's, those underwater shots in Jaws wouldn't be anything if there wasn't the music in Jaws. You'd just be like, oh, yeah, feet. Okay. So it really does set a scene. So I did, while I was watching it, wondered, like, what is missing? I know what's missing. It's the atmospheric sound that I'm used to. There's none of that. There's none
It's
of
all
that.
visual.
Yeah, it's all visual, which is beautiful. And honestly, there are scenes that are quite gorgeous, but I kind of miss the music.
Yeah.
We don't think about the effect of a built-in soundscape
Until it's missing.
very often.
Until it's missing or wrong. Like if you've ever watched a movie that has a really bad soundtrack, you're like, what music is this right now? So, I mean, at least it wasn't the wrong music, but it is kind of odd when you're watching it going, what am I missing? Oh, it's sound. It's the little noises, like the little background, like even if it was just like a da-da-da-da-da-da-da, so that you knew that things are being spooky and icky.
Yeah. Well, and plus when you think about the sounds you did have outside of obvious dialogue, like some I know they were doing what they could for the time, but they obviously don't hold up. Like the squeaky noises for the bat, like straight Scooby Doo sound and stuff. Like,
Strings in the shots. You can see the strings.
well, yeah, I mean, the effects are 1931, not great effects even for 31, but yeah, you see the strings, you could see somebody like being like, come on, flap, the kind of feeling when you see the bat. The wolf sounds I thought were good, but like, like the mousy squeaky sounds for the bat were very funny and
They were really funny. Also, 1931. So I was like, hey, in case you were wondering, the castle's just a painted backdrop. It's just like, what? Are you kidding? Because it was obviously a painting. Like it was almost watercolor. Like you could tell it was a painting.
well, and back to the budget constraints you pointed out, of course, that probably was part of it as well. So you don't really, yeah, there's not this is not an effect driven movie. It is an atmosphere, like visual atmosphere and lighting driven movie for sure. And
It
dialogue.
definitely, yeah. Yeah, there's you're relying so much on feeling to convey.
Absolutely. I
Yeah.
will
And
say, like, my version had like the making of Dracula like documentary that we watched. And it was interesting because they were talking to people and they were like, a lot of people when they're doing their Draculas are either doing Bela Lugosi or trying their hardest not to do Bela Lugosi. It is one or the other.
I can see where that would come into play because it's
absolutely fair.
yeah, I mean it's so big in the legend of
Mhm.
the Dracula film. So
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, and also, I'm sorry, just Bela is like the most authentic to go there because he actually was Hungarian,
yes.
born, left there, he emigrated to the United States much later in life. So he's kind of beyond just his acting making it iconic, his ancestry and his voice and his stylizations make it iconic as well. I'm sorry, Rebecca, back to you.
Yeah. Oh no, yeah, I don't think I had anything significant there. Yeah. I mean, he barely spoke. He didn't speak any English when he came over the country. Um, they said some of his parts he learned phonetically.
Not
Yeah.
for this movie. Actually, I looked that up because that was the rumor I had always believed too. And that was for movies he did in the 20s where he would learn to
That's
speak them
yeah,
phonetically.
that's what I
But
thought.
by the time he did Dracula, he was fluent in English. He actually spoke, I think, 3 or 4 different languages. So he spoke his native Hungarian, he spoke French, he spoke German, he spoke English, and I think there might have been one more. But and they said he spoke French so well that he actually did not have a Hungarian accent when he spoke French, and yet the other languages he did still, which is interesting.
How
But
funny.
yeah, I grew up on the myth too that when he was filming Dracula, that he was all phonetic. But they say that was either I can't remember the name of a movie he shot in the 20s, or it might have been when
Yeah.
he first started acting it on stage in the States, where he was doing it
I
phonetically.
would have suspected it would have been his early work in the States, like right after, he got started.
Yeah.
Which, fun fact, Bela was 49 years old when he did this movie. I mean, you
Damn.
could tell he's not young, but
Yeah.
Right.
I found that rather exciting. I was like, oh, okay. So he
kind of
became
love it.
really Hollywood famous at 49 when he became this icon from this movie. So
I kind of love it. I mean,
mhm.
I'll be perfectly honest. Like I was one of those kids that I know we're gonna be shocked by this. I was super goth all the time. And so when I had to pick like an actor to like feature when I was taking like ninth grade acting class in high school, everybody else was like Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan and Jennifer Aniston. And I chose Bela Lugosi to
Nice.
talk about. And my teacher's like, wow, you really went somewhere like, but he was a stage actor. He, did all these things, but he was really, really interesting. Like he had
He
been
was
a spy, he had been in various wars, and that's how he ended up coming to America, is that he was actually pretty wanted in Hungary.
An
And it
activist
really
for
he,
great.
unionizing.
Yeah.
yeah.
So
That's why he
and
had to go to the Weimar Republic for a while. That's what led to the ending of his first marriage because he's like, I got a jet or they're gonna kill me. And his first wife is like, yeah, I'm not leaving. So
Yeah, he was very pro union to the point that he was one of the founding members of SAG, the Screen
Yep.
Actors Guild. So thanks, Bella. How awesome are you?
yes.
Which is funny because when you like, I don't know, maybe it was just me, but when I was younger, up until like probably about 10, 15 years ago, when they Bela is really presented as somebody who's like an ignorant like immigrant. Like when you first read him, they're like, yeah, he had to learn everything phonetically because he couldn't speak English, or he, just came over and he just ended up being a drug addict that Ed Wood befriended. And I'm like, none of this is really true. Like he did have an addiction to morphine, but it actually was a physical addiction and not like a mental or psychological one. He had war injuries from, I believe, the first from World War I. He was in the Hungarian forces, and he sustained several wounds. And so they gave him morphine to do the pain, to get rid of the pain. And so that's why he was addicted physically, because it got rid of the pain, not because he wanted to shoot up with heroin all the time.
I knew it was a back injury. I
Not to
didn't know
belittle
the
people with
details.
psychological addictions. It's all very real and we understand that. But the portrayal of him was very different from what he actually was. Like often, unless you delved into encyclopedias or later years Wikipedia or whatever, you didn't really know all this. Even him being an inaugural member of the actors union is all very much not spoken
Truly.
about a lot.
Yeah. It there's a kind of a mythos around him, just like there is around Dracula, which is kind of interesting. Like as someone who played, became very famous for playing that kind of a role, um, he had kind of a mythos around him that way, where people are like, oh, this is who he is. And I don't think it's really who he was at all. I think it was really interesting. They were talking to his son a lot. And his son's like, from the time I was little, I would, play my dad's Dracula, which his son looks
Yeah,
just like him if you haven't seen
I
him.
saw the same clip.
Yeah. And I'm like, that's adorable. And you don't see that, you don't hear that side of who this man was when you're young and you're learning about this. I'm really glad to have done even more research into him for this because I'm like, this is really interesting.
What I loved reading, like some of the trivia and stuff, was like he was not into the Hollywood schmooze, like where people would wheel and deal and go into the big parties and stuff. Bela was like, no, he would have small parties with like cast and crew, like not like the big wigs that could advance his career, but just people that he enjoyed to be around. And apparently, he was a bit of a prankster too. Like he'd hire like physical comedians to come and pretend to be a waiter and almost spill stuff on people, and just silly little
That
like
one I
goofy
didn't
gags like
know.
that, slapstick kind of stuff. And it
Love
sounds like he
that.
was a hell of a guy. And you're right, anytime you hear an interview from his son, you get the impression that he actually was fun as a father too. Sounds like most men of the era, and far too many nowadays, terrible husband. But
Yes, yeah. From everything I read, he did very much expect,
bit of a
the wife
philanderer,
is to give up her career and keep the house.
and
And
also cheated on many of them as well. So
yeah, too.
allegedly,
Yeah.
I don't know the truth, but I wasn't there. But
Well, I mean, I, so recently I was listening to a podcast that was talking, they were doing a fuck Mary Kill, and it was Dracula, I think the Wolfman, and something else. I don't remember what the third one was, but everybody was like, "Ooh, you'd fuck Dracula, obviously." And I was laughing because I'm like, "Well, yeah." And so, can you imagine? Because that was like universal. Everyone was like, "Oh, Dracula, obviously." That's who he
I think
is.
the Wolfman be a beast in bed too, right?
Right.
I think I'm funny.
You expect it to be super seductive and like
Yeah, she gets some good foreplay out of Dracula. That's just,
you better get some good foreplay out of Dracula. At least some really good neck chewing, like
Mm.
One would
Another
think.
interesting fact. So Bela in Dracula never wore fangs. There's no fangs that come out. Which it's funny because anytime you think of vampire, you think of Dracula, you think fangs, and they're not here, and you don't miss them. Like
Yeah,
there's no
no,
point where
there's
you go, oh, that's not a vampire, because you don't see fangs. Because I mean, a lot of it probably has to do with the lighting and Bela's expressions and his hand motions, which sometimes seem over the top now, but I mean, the iconic scene when you first see his hand crawling out of the coffin to raise the lid is
Love that
so
scene.
epic and beautiful. Like it's a
Yeah.
very graceful hand. I want to emulate it for belly dance. You know what I mean? He's very
Yeah.
deliberate in the motions and it's lovely, which sounds weird. It's a lovely hand coming out of
And
amongst
it
the
was.
rats in the mist, but it was.
It was.
And
It
the
was.
random possums and armadillos that showed up on the screen. I'm watching it like,
I don't know, but I did not think armadillos were indigenous to the
no, I mean,
Transylvanian area.
I
They're
understand they're
not.
trying to convey corruption, but I don't
So
understand
here's
what about
in the
armadillos as corruption.
trivia on IMDb. Apparently, armadillos were around graveyards a lot. And they would like dig for bugs in the graveyards. So they got a reputation for eating corpses. So they added them
Thank
in
you.
as a,
Okay.
and I was like, I had no idea that was a thing.
Me neither. I still don't think they would have been hungry, but like good enough though. But at least there's now a logic behind why we have armadillos.
Yeah.
Yes, that is why they included armadillos. And I'm like, that is the weirdest thing I've ever heard in my entire life.
That takes the cake. That's for something else.
I was
So the
honestly
actual
surprised.
movie, though, we were discussing a little bit before we hit the record button that for some reason there was in our brains there's a lot more epicness going on with like the hunts and the kills and stuff than there actually is in this movie, which is funny in a weird way. But like there's even stuff like so. And guys, correct me. I think even in Nosferatu they did this as well, where instead of Harker being the start, where you know like in the book and in more modern versions of Dracula, it starts with Harker traveling to Transylvania. Renfield had already been and gone insane, and they just mention him in passing that Harker has come in to take over. But in this, and I believe in Nosferatu, they focus on Renfield going up there, and a lot of the stuff that actually happens in the book to Harker, they put on Renfield instead in this version. And what I find mostly amusing is these people are warning him about Walpurgis Night, and at no point does Renfield go, "Well, what the hell is Walpurgis Night?" like like they explain him about like, no, these people come out and they sleep during the day in coffins and they like hunt for blood at night, and he's all fine with that. Doesn't even ask what Walpurgis Night is. He's like, no, I'm okay. It's fine. I have business to do. They'll wait to suck my blood later.
Right.
I assume he takes it as
Silly,
whatever
superstitious peasants.
unimportant Eastern European the word is escaping me.
Superstition, folklore.
Thank you.
Yeah. I feel you, girl. It happens to me. I'm like, where's that word? But yeah, I mean, just not a hint of curiosity at all. Just
I don't think from somebody in that particular, he's a man of business. I don't think he would be.
fair. But shout out to that actor that played Renfield, though. I mean,
Yes,
he is epic in his crazy eye. Epic. Like, there's no doubt he's off his fucking rocker.
it was
Especially that scene where he's
I-
coming up from the belly of the ship.
stairs in the
Yeah, he's like,
yeah, I feel like he did some amazing work in that. He apparently got a little bit of a typecast because he was very known to be able to play the villains and the crazies very well, which I mean we see that so clearly in this film. He did such a wonderful job. And I'm a little sad, like I was looking him up and apparently he died young, because he died in 44. And I'm a little bummed. I'm like, what else would we have seen from him as an actor if he hadn't passed away so soon?
yeah, his name is Dwight Fry, by the way. I had to look it up. I'm afraid I didn't memorize it, but yeah.
Yeah.
Just, yeah. Well, he was born in 1899. He died in 1943. He was 44 years old when he died.
Yeah.
that's right.
To
Yeah,
follow up on what you said, Rebecca.
Yeah, I honestly, his role in the movie was really enjoyable to watch because it was so versatile. It went from manic to quiet and submissive, back to crazy again, and just at the drop of a hat. And props to that guy for being able to play such a dynamic role.
Absolutely. Like
I mean,
starting
yeah,
out like as so like cocksure and just being like, ha, 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 I'm a man of business and I'm doing my thing, da, 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 da. And then being able to turn like that and be like scared and like it was really well done.
I think that's also part of it. So like the beginning of the movie is pretty like jam. It gets the atmosphere, it gets action down. I mean, even to the point where like when they go meet at the Borgo Pass and like other coachman like literally just like throws his bag out of the coach and keeps like barely stops to let him out. It's like here, poof, gone. And like they build it up so well. And then by the time you get to London, most of that buildup is almost gone. Like, you know what I mean? Especially when you get to like the ending part where where Dracula's going after Mina and stuff. It's just I mean, maybe it goes to the point of budget constraints and them running out of time and trying to get it to the, box office, but it just kind of it hits the point where once Mina's initially attacked, it's just poof, like next thing you know, done.
You're not wrong.
Yeah, I don't know if that's an issue of pacing or much like what you said, they were just in a hurry to try to get the rest of it, and I don't know.
It does almost feel like budget constraints because it felt like they were trying to do as much as they possibly could on like a set as quickly as possible. And I also I watched that documentary. I found out that at the same time that they were filming Dracula, they were filming Dracula in Spanish.
Yes.
So they would film a scene and immediately fill in with the Spanish actors and film it again.
Not quite. They did a more like one group would have the set during the day and the other would have it at night.
Well, that's what I mean. Like they would just flip
okay.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So they would film during the day, flip it. Spanish people would come in. Some people said the Spanish version is actually better.
Yes. Yeah,
because they said they were
that they look at it and they're like, what if we change this and this here for this little bit? And they would film it slightly different. And yeah, maybe the changes help. I haven't watched the Spanish version yet, so I couldn't say.
I'm gonna try to find it because I don't have it. So I'm like, all right, I need to try to find that.
I think it may be on my Blu-ray. So
that's part of it. That one time when we went to go see the Fathom event, they were doing the Spanish version right after it, but it was late at night and we didn't have the endurance for it. I think it was you who was with me, Rebecca, wasn't it?
Probably, yeah.
And we didn't end up staying for all of it, but it looked like even the way they started filming it, like it looked like it had a better budget and everything. Like it just, I mean, I guess it didn't, but it looked like less painted in the background, and it's interesting.
Really did sound like what they would do is they would literally watch the dailies and then be like, oh, that's what the English people did. All right, we're gonna better that and let's make it better.
That's exactly what they did. That's exactly. They would watch it and they're like, no, we're gonna change that.
Yeah, no, I think it needs to be more dynamic here. Let's do it. And I'm really interested to see it. I just think that's really interesting. But I wonder how much that played into like maybe they rushed some of those scenes because they knew that they had to get them done during the day since they were recording something right afterwards. And they didn't want to take them, you're still paying your laborers. So how much do you want to pay? So I do wonder, I don't think that it had that much of an effect, but I do wonder how much of an effect that it had on the daytime if they knew that they had to turn it over and have it ready for night.
I'm sure it
go long because they're recording right afterwards. So
it's logical to figure that it probably had some effect.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, they had to have an impact. Like there's probably times where where the scene was probably not exactly as they wanted it, but it was close enough, so they're not going to rerun it because they knew that they had to be out of there by, X
by
time.
Said time. Yeah.
I'm sure.
Interesting.
The other thing that it's kind of interesting to be like, really, this movie focuses more on Renfield than it does on Dracula. If you think about it, he's kind of the major player in it, and they are always focusing on him. And even to the part, but this is what I really thought. They made sanitariums look kind of pleasant and cozy, like. I mean, even though like Martin keeps calling, Renfield a loony and fly eater, he's not beating him. The place is pretty clean. Yeah. There's no padded walls. You don't. And Jesus, this guy broke out like every night. And they're like, it's fine.
Yeah, and they're just like, oh, just go back to your room. Come on. Yeah, it
I
looks
mean,
like it was the very restful type of sanitarium and not the torture kind. Oh,
remembering Nosferatu and what happened to poor Renfield in that, and he's in the cell and he's being like all kinds of stuff is happening to him, and you're like, oh no, poor Renfield. And in this one, he's just like wandering around, like, oh, I love the
First thing you do
rats,
is
and
take
you're
his
like, oh,
flies and
guy.
spiders away. They won't let him eat them,
yeah.
which I thought was pretty funny. The Harker character is almost useless in this. I mean, he's kind of like the way they normally portray female characters in it. He's like wringing his hands and like, saying stupid
He's
shit for the most part, like, but not actually doing anything
yeah,
useful.
he is useless in the film. And he's a prop for Helen Chandler's character.
Yeah, she does excellent.
She was beautiful. And that scene, it's the scene after like she's really been like when she tries to bite Jonathan. Her eyes in that scene. She does the super intense Bela Lugosi stare, and it's great. It's great. I'm
Just
like,
like
yeah,
fixating on that
girl, get
spot on
it.
his neck. She's like, right there. I'm gonna bite right
Yeah,
there.
and I'm gonna get you right
Can
there.
see that
And you're like,
pulse. It's ooh.
what a change in her. Also, her clothing was great.
Oh yeah, yeah, they did a good job on that. Yeah, this movie was the movie of intense gaze.
Yes, sure.
It is a
Very good
movie
eye
of
contact.
intense gaze, which
But
again, seduction.
yeah, Lucy, they completely glossed over her. There's like, there she is in her room, and then she's dead, and well, then she's in the auditorium where they're like, nope, she's dead. They don't even do a lady in white scene. You know, she's they don't do a death scene for her, really.
There's a lot of material that's lacking from
Um,
this.
Yeah,
really what gets me the most is the abrupt ending. So they have all this sort of build up to like Mina being seduced to the dark side, basically, which is, kind of what's happening. And then Dracula carries her off, and there's Renfield. He kills Renfield because he feels Renfield betrayed him by leading Harker and Van Helsing to him. And then next thing you know, you hear Renfield scream. Then they're all in Carfax Abbey. They can't find Mina, who's stood, frozen in a corner because the sunlight was coming up, so Dracula couldn't get to her. And they just open up Dracula's box and done. And I like felt like there should have been more than that. I could have swore there was more to it than that, but no, there's not. That's it. And it's literally hugs Mina, and you hear wedding bell chimes, and then poof, the end.
Van Helsing was very direct and to the point, apparently.
Like all the build up and no orgasm really comes from it. Let me just put it that way. There's just pretty much,
I
oh,
mean,
you're
but
done.
truly,
Okay. You're
truly,
done.
and yeah, and I have to think that it has to be that I just have devoured so many other Dracula properties that in my head I'm like, this had to be more than this, and then rewatching it, I'm like, apparently
Nope.
it is not.
Really not. Nope.
I had to ask Rebecca and Betsy, I'm like, was I continuously blinking at the same spot and missing something? They're like, nope, nope, that's what I'm like, okay. So it's kind
Yeah,
of a
I can
letdown nowadays. I mean, I still love it. It's always going to have a place in my heart. There is, the one true Dracula is Bela Lugosi. I mean, nobody else stands up, period. End of story. There's others that are great, but Bela exists, so he wins. And but yeah, like as far as Dracula movies go, they've done better in more recent years. Is like
I
I
mean,
feel like even the Hammer films gave more. You know what I mean? Like
oh,
this is just
absolutely, absolutely.
go with that. I think this one is better than the Hammer films.
I wouldn't say, yeah, I didn't say Hammer was better. I said it gave more.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, they gave him more, I think, because I think you're right. This feels like a Renfield film, which is interesting. Because honestly, I would love to watch a Renfield film. Wouldn't you love to see a film that was just Renfield, like what it was for him, and then him being like, "I've been abandoned, and now I'm eating
Yeah,
bugs."
it would make an interesting subject. Yeah.
Yeah, but this one feels kind of like a Renfield film, and I wonder how much of that was just them taking from the. I haven't seen the play of Dracula, to know if it's that Renfield focused or if they I kind of wonder, like I wondered, and that because it was the 1920s, 30s, if some of it was that they were afraid people would be turned off by the accent on Bela, which we weren't. But I wonder if they felt like if they had him speak too much, if people would have been like, mm.
Well, I did read that Bela wanted to be a romantic lead in the Hollywood films, but they wouldn't let him be, partially because
I
this
read that as
typecasted him,
well.
but also I expect it was a bit of racism too. So he was Hungarian and Serbian, I believe his mother was Serbian.
Yeah.
So that's not white, so you can't have him kissing white girls
I was
there.
gonna
So
say,
I
I
think there's
mean,
like only one or two movies where there's a slight interaction. It's more like a peck on the cheek kind of thing, or peck on the lips, but no, like no, as you would view like a romantic lead interacting with its female lead, And I
yeah,
wonder if that's also part of what's going on here. That yeah, like you said, they don't want to romanticize the
yes,
the
this.
not quite white guy, which I think was a similar thing that happened to Karloff as well,
It
right?
was. It was.
Because he was part
Yeah.
Indian.
He was part Indian, and so he was considered not white. So they couldn't have him kissing girls on screen because it would have been biracial and they couldn't have it, which is, I mean, in today's world, we're like, really? But I mean, it was big then. It was a legitimate problem, but it seems
To
so
them.
silly because it's
It is
Dracula.
silly.
You want to see Dracula like right up in their faces. You want that like right in the neck shots. And I also thought it was fun. In the facts for this, they wouldn't let the scene, if you notice, there's the scene when he attacks Renfield. They cut it where they did because they thought it would look too gay. Him actually doing for Renfield.
I'm
Know
not
that.
shocked. Not surprised.
So they couldn't have man on man sucking. So they made them cut it. They wouldn't let them show it. They were like, no, he only drinks from women.
Yeah,
I
one thing I
think
always think
too.
about for all the Dracula movies and even the book, the whole fact that he had three wives and he was just like, yeah, I'm off to England. Left,
I left the brides.
yeah, like
True.
and that's what happened in the book too. Like, though to be fair, when he left the brides behind, they were also entertaining themselves on Harker until he escaped. So they like, had some amusement. He just kind of like, I'm out. Here's him.
Apparently,
Enjoy.
yeah, Bram Stoker is it's in one of his notes, the scenes with the brides, like how Dracula is chasing them off. So apparently Bram Stoker really wanted the three brides in there. So
Yeah. But
it's
no, it's not
interesting
about
that
being in there. It's the fact that Dracula left them behind without even a skip. I'm off.
hmm.
And like I said, in the book it happened too. Like, he had the three brides. Like I said, he left Harker there with them and went off to England. And
Did I blink and miss how he found out about Mina?
well, they were all in the box at the symphony or the
I did
opera.
blink and miss it.
Yeah.
And that's how he found out about Lucy too. But they never really, I mean, I guess since it was the closest place to Carfax Abbey, maybe that's why, but he deliberately went to get an introduction to that group. And they don't really talk about why, you know what I mean, in the movie at all. It's just, hey, this is Dr. Seward's box. Has the maid go in and pretend there's a phone call so he can step in and be like, oh, did I hear your name was? It was very weird.
Yeah, that
Very well
was
done though. Yeah. His
yeah.
method of meeting his neighbors, so to speak.
Yeah,
But yeah,
I just thought it was interesting that, in the past, like even in Nosferatu, he saw the picture of Mina, and that's what drove him to
Yes.
be where he was going and doing all these things. But in this one, it was like, I'm gonna go to England. Da, 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 da. Oh, there's the girl. And it wasn't driven, it's a difference of he wasn't driven by her to go to England. He was going to England and finds her, which is interesting.
Yeah.
It's not it's just not what it usually is.
yeah, and like I said, there's also no no explanation as to why, even after in England. Like they don't make it seem like he saw her on the street, like nothing. Like, the first kill he has in England is the poor flower girl. So, flower
Poor
for your
flower
buttonhole,
girl.
sir. Which I
No.
thought,
How about I suck your blood?
let's be honest, he took the flower for his buttonhole too. But he's like, okay.
Yeah. I'll have to go back and watch that scene, see if they do.
I don't know that they actually show him with the flower at
They
all, but I
should
think they
have.
just
They,
cut to the
they,
alley and you hear the scream and that's it. But it would have been awesome if he just
It would have been
tucked it in.
funnier if he.
it's one of those tiny little details that would have made it.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Maybe it would have added too much humor though. It's kind of what we
Yeah.
want, but
Yeah, it's not exactly what we're looking for. Something else that we discussed earlier, but I feel like needs to be brought up is the fact that this does not have a soundtrack. There is no
yeah,
music. So there's an opening act and an ending act, which is actually the Dying Swan from Swan Lake, but or the Black Swan, one of those. But it is not a soundtrack. Like there's no music throughout the
Yeah.
rest of the film,
yeah.
which is interesting.
You just wonder what it would have been like. Could you imagine if they added music to when he was creeping up or when he was creeping out of the coffin? It would have just
I think it would
chills,
have helped the
Yeah,
movie overall if it had one.
truly, because like when we were watching Nosferatu, we just happened to pick a version that had like a score to it. And it really did change like all the creeping and the creepiness and whatever. It was simple, but it really did show you that it was creepy because it was like, the music was creepy.
Mm-hmm.
And in this one, like there were parts, like I said, that I was like, I'm sure that this was probably scary in 1920, whatever. But right now, it's not particularly scary. I mean, he's being menacing a little bit, but it's not scary. And I think that that could have helped, like, just take it up that notch.
for
He
sure.
comes off as more mm, alien a little bit. Uh, I feel like the way he's portraying it in this, and much with the lack of the soundtrack, it seems to be focusing on how the vampire doesn't quite fit in.
Right.
It's like he's trying to appear human, but he doesn't remember. Doesn't remember
How?
him.
Yeah.
Which actually I think was a theme in the book to some degree, though he had Harker with him for so long because he was trying to learn to human again because he had been
Mhm.
basically isolated aside from his, driving Renfield loony.
It's been a while since I've read the book, so I'm not
It's
really
been a while for me
familiar.
too, so I might be incorrect in my recollection, but I do think that was. I mean, it didn't come out and say that, but I think it was implied in when we were reading it that he was having him around so long because he
Yeah.
wanted to be able to get it, and also like remind yourself in the book he left Harker there to die, like
Well, absolutely.
Yeah.
Harker was not supposed to make it out.
yeah, at all. So
Mhm.
pretty
Decidedly not.
interesting. But like Van Helsing, now that's another interesting character in this. Like I again, ages since I read the book, but I don't remember him being like over the top. And yet in almost every portrayal, sorry, I keep sounding like I'm saying betrayal, but no, portrayal of him in the movies, you really do see like this over the top kind of sort of frenzied energy off of Van Helsing. Like you even see it
Yeah.
when Anthony Hopkins does it in the Francis Ford Coppola's version. It's just
Yeah.
this like I don't know that if I were Dr. Seward, I'd be like following him either. I'd been like, dude, you need to
But you need to calm down. Maybe you need a weekend in the sanitarium.
carry him. And which is funny because I do believe Renfield says that they all sound crazy.
Yes, he totally does. He's like, you guys sound crazy, which
But,
is great because he like says it so like matter of fact. It's one of those real good swings of his. So he's like, you sound crazy, and you're like, yeah, you were eating bugs a minute ago, dude. So
and Martin, the comic relief orderly, definitely gives you that like Abbott and Costello vibe. It's
Oh,
just
definitely.
always at the moment, even to the point where he's shooting at the large bat and like he's like, yeah, they're all crazy here except for maybe us. And then he looks over at the maid, he's like, I question whether or not you're sick.
Yeah, isn't he like, I have my doubts about you.
Yeah, exactly. That's the yes, thank you. That's the I think the exact quote there. But and it's just fun because I like that lighthearted little insertion there. And I think, I mean, at the time, like I said, this is not a scary movie to us now at all. Like it just if they added music, it might give it that vibe as we keep pointing out. But with just the visual atmosphere and even with like the lighting and stuff, it's you could see where it's menacing, but it doesn't come off as scary, even though it is classic horror. It's just it doesn't hold up in the times. But that nice little element. I could see if you were an audience back in 1931 watching this, having this nice little relief of the silly ass character Martin, that it would
Right.
let you breathe for a minute,
Yeah.
then to go on with the menacing.
Yeah, I can totally see where it's in there. But like having done Nosferatu earlier and then watching this, I feel like Nosferatu is so much scarier than this. And I do wonder how much of that was
The music.
that I was listening to with music. Yeah, that the music told me that it was scary. I wonder if I had watched Nosferatu silent, if it would have held. I mean, there are parts of it though that are just creepy. Matt Shrek is just a creepy person in general.
Yes.
Like he looked creepy with the two teeth and the ears and everything. So I'm thinking that would have been creepy because he was just creepy, and lurky. I love him, but he's a creepy, lurky person. And I think Bela was so like he's such a gentleman. Like he had that upright bearing, like he seemed like a count, like he was royalty, like he was debonair and royal. And so it's harder to look at him and be like, that man could eat me. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, he's menacing in
that's
the
my
sense of
blood.
the way that rich, white, privileged men are menacing. Like they don't come across at you like, oh, this guy's gonna kill me. But the fact that they have power and money and makes them a horror that you aren't able to deal with
Right.
once they attack. But
Yeah.
seeing them does not make you think you're immediately under threat, even though you should always be aware that you pretty much are.
I was gonna say, but they are in fact men, so probably you should be wary.
Yeah, but yeah. I mean, the menace is all implied in it for the most part. It's not really up. It's just the fact that this guy well, the fact like that Renfield kept escaping, the fact that he could get into this house and into this room, it was unstoppable. That whether or not this woman wanted him at her throat, he was there. Like literally, not figuratively.
Absolutely.
So, which in a way is kind of like the thought of like actual abusive relationships that there was no escape no matter what you did until eventually they shoved a stake through his heart. But which is the solution even in modern
I was
times.
gonna say, which is the solution we can all take if we need to.
Not that we're advocating murder, but when it comes down to it, a girl or a person, a being's got to do what a being's got to do to survive.
Absolutely. Once
And
again,
if
we're
that
not
means stake a
advocating
white privileged
murder.
incel, that means stake a white privileged incel. Modern problems call for
Modern
antique
solution.
solutions.
I was gonna say ancient solutions.
The classics are the classics. But another interesting like random facts that are outside of the movie but have to do with like Bela himself, that they put forth that like Bela and Karloff were like supposed to be like Crawford and Davis, but they actually weren't. Like in a very similar situation, well, even less so than Crawford and Davis. But the only time there was conflict's too strong a word, but the only time there was any kind of competition was for roles because they were both cast in these monster villain roles, and so they were often going for the same roles. And that probably even throws Lon Chaney Jr. because if I recall correctly, Bela wanted to be the Wolfman, which in a sense he was, but he wasn't the main Wolfman in the Wolfman movie. And originally, interestingly, I do believe Lon Chaney Sr., not Jr., was supposed to be Dracula, and then he died
Correct.
suddenly. Well, I guess it wasn't really so sudden. It was cancer, but it's it was 1930,
Yeah.
so that they probably didn't catch it early, and he just died.
Well,
So
and they said it wasn't They wanted him for the role, but they hadn't even secured the rights yet.
Yeah.
So he wasn't actually up for the role, but the original director who wanted to secure the rights did want him. But when it came down to it, by the time they got the rights secured, he was gone. So
So they had
it
to
wasn't
go.
like he was competing with Bela. By the time Bela got into it, Lon was gone. He had already
Now I
passed.
didn't look this up. Now I know Bram Stoker's widow was very protective of the rights of it, and that's why, Nosferatu is Nosferatu, not Dracula, and other movies got destroyed. And I think some of the Prince of Nosferatu got destroyed before
They
everything was said
did.
and done. But was she dead by the time they finally got the rights for Dracula, or was she still, and they just finally gave her enough
This is
money?
this is another fun fact. Bela contacted her directly
Okay.
and was like, "We would really like to do this." And because he had done the Broadway show, she was kind of familiar with him, and so he talked her down for securing the rights for the film from 200,000 to $60,000 to
Good
secure the
Lord.
rights for the film. So that was part of why he got the role, because he was so active in trying to petition for it that they felt like they owed him because he got it down so low.
That's awesome.
And I'm like, good for him. But yeah, he was so like familiar with her that he was like schmoozing her a little bit. And I was like, how did that work? Good for you.
Go Bela. Yeah.
I like him so much.
I do too. Well, another
Yeah.
random fun fact about him is so in almost all of his roles, with the exception of like if he was literally playing a monster or when he was playing somebody of Romani family, he was in Texas. Like he was almost always in Texas. But in real life, he liked flannel. He's like, put my flannel on, I'm all comfy. He was not about formal wear at all.
Which is
Bella the grunge.
which is kind
Did
of
not
fun.
know
I'd
that
like to.
one.
I'm gonna have to look for a picture of him in flannel because I would like to see it.
I
I
would
bet
love
there
to
is.
see it. I don't know that there is anything, but
Oh, come on, his son has to have something. I also
one of those.
like. We found out that his son and wife, who he was married to at the time that he passed away, trademarked both his name, Bela Lugosi as Dracula. Uh, all of these things are trademarked. So they have trademarked everything so that if you want to use like Bela Lugosi, you have to pay his family, which I'm like, good for you guys, because people are going to use him because he's so famous, and that way you get the rights to it. So they get a little
He was
kickback every
not
time you see
wealthy when
something
he
with that.
died. I think he was damn near impoverished by the time he
Pretty
died, if I
much.
remember correctly.
The fact that he was not getting a lot of roles because he was so typecast. So he didn't have a lot of money coming in from that. He had his drug issues and treatments. So yeah, he was
Yeah. And I think
not
it's
in a
funny
good
too.
position.
So his name was such a draw, though, that even like in later films where he was just playing like a butler or something, they would bill
Yeah.
him at the top and he would show up as a butler for 3 seconds in a scene. And though another thing that I read, and this may just be a rumor thing that I read, that when he and Karloff were in the same movies, initially they would be putting Karloff at the top, but over time span, like Bela made more money.
Yeah.
So Bela's name made more money. Whether or not he actually did is a different
Yeah,
story.
I don't think he saw much of it.
And
Well,
another fun thing is he was a stamp collector and he ended up on 2 stamps, I believe. So I think somewhere out there in the void of space and death, he's like, cool, I'm on a stamp.
He's interesting.
I thought
He didn't.
there was a series of stamps of the Universal Monster movies.
There
Or
That
the
was
was.
one of
Universal
the
Monsters. And because I swear to God, I thought I had a set like that. I may still. I don't know. I'm gonna have to go look.
yeah,
Yeah.
there definitely was. And there was another series that he ended up in too, but I think it might have been, I don't remember what it was, but so there was 2 separate stamps that he ended up being on.
Yeah.
But Universal Monster series was definitely one of them.
Yeah, because it was just a couple of years ago. I remember that one. Yeah, also interesting is that he wanted this role so bad that he didn't really negotiate very well for himself.
No, you got like
So
$500 a week contract
five
price.
hundred dollars a week. Harker, the guy who played Harker, who we were just talking about, was like a nobody or like a nothing in this film. $2,000 a week.
Oh
$2,000 a
man.
week. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So he did not negotiate for himself well because he really wanted this role. Like really wanted it. But I'm guessing that something like that is probably why he started SAG.
I would imagine. Yeah.
Well, he was a
And
big, well, really the thing that got him on the kill list in Hungary was union stuff. He was a big advocate of unions. I forgot the exact name of the union there, but and the right wing regime that was in control at the time was not about a basically a socialist union, and that's it. So he was always a strong union person. So I'm sure it fed into the fact that he was making such low wages in Hollywood, but yeah, he was a union guy, period. You know. So sorry, Rebecca, you were
yeah,
saying.
yeah. I remember. Okay.
Yay!
Although it's more of a side note than anything that after this film, he was never picked up by contract for any of the studios.
Right?
Yeah. So he never
Isn't that
had,
interesting?
never was contracted for, X number of pictures, blah, blah, blah. He was pretty much an independent in the studio system. So I'm sure that factored into his efforts with SAG.
Though some of those contracts were shit. So I mean that might have been a good
Agreed,
thing
agreed,
versus a
but they're
bad thing.
horrible.
So it's hard to know.
Yeah.
But I mean, at least you got paid. But sometimes it was like you got paid nothing, or your contract would specify something like you get paid per movie, and then they wouldn't put you in movies, and you couldn't go do stuff outside of it. But Hollywood was a bit. I mean, not like it's obviously probably still got its issues. Not that I know, but when you read about like old school Hollywood, they were fucking brutal to actors.
You're
Brutal.
not
Like
wrong. You're not
I
wrong.
mean, ugh, like film after film and like you will or else and then like all these clauses like they were in your life in
Oh
and
yeah,
out of the
big time.
movies
I mean,
um
the
like
fact that they used to make people date and stuff is just
mhm.
no.
And marry and hide things and
Oh yeah.
harsh, man. I mean, ugh.
Yeah, I do not.
Blah.
I do not envy at the time, but it is interesting that he never got because most of them, especially the ones who did the monster movies, ended up
Contract.
being in contract so that they would play the monsters again and again and again. So the fact that he was not is kind of interesting because he did end up playing Dracula at least one more time on screen, um, for Abbott and Costello.
Mhm. Yeah, he played vampires throughout, but yeah, I think there was only one, maybe two times outside of the main one where he played
Yeah, where he
Dracula
played
specifically
Dracula. Yeah.
and not just a vampire.
Yeah. Oh,
I
yeah. He
have
could
the
continue to play
Abbott
vampires.
Costello one. I've never actually sat down and watched it.
What is it?
It's been ages.
I was saying that I had not seen the Abbott Costello movie, although I have it on DVD.
As a kid, I watched them all. I loved the Abbott and Costello meets Frankenstein, Abbott and Costello meets the Wolfman, I would watch them anytime they came on TV, but I don't think I've seen them since I was a kid, to be honest. So we'll have to revisit them and do the comedic version, I guess. But I'm trying to remember which one it was where, like, I don't think they ever called him Dracula, but there was a movie he was in, him and some other woman that they were playing vampires, but they were playing performers that were pretending to be vampires, but at the end of it, they were actually vampires, but it was supposed to be like real, like whether or not are you or aren't you. But I can't remember the movie, but I'll have to find it because it was pretty funny. Like, because that was one where Bela like petitioned for the ending to change because initially it was that they were going to just be like in the movie actors that were pretending to be vampires for whatever reason, but he couldn't have that. He was like, no, we have to be actual vampires in the end or something. And I think the movie ended with them turning into bats and flying off after they were outed as being actors pretending to be vampires. But I can't remember the name of the movie. And
You
I
can
just
find
remember that he
it
was like, you can't make me not be a vampire.
if you
I'm Bela
know. Let
Lugosi.
me
I am a
know.
vampire. But yeah, so people, if you're anybody's watching that, you want to look it up as a nice bit of trivia, go ahead and let us know. But other than that, all I could say is like Dracula will always be a classic. It will always be my kind of from another podcast warm blanket movie. Um,
Absolutely.
I think Bela was probably my first crush ever. I love that he was Hungarian because when I was a kid, I'm of Slovak and Hungarian descent for the most part, a little bit of Lithuanian thrown in for flavor. And like my family's like only second or third generation in the States. Like my grandparents were literally, most of them were first generation born in the States. One of them actually was not born in the States. He came over. And there's a weird, well, not weird, traditionally from back in like World War I and World War II, Hungarians and Slovak people do not get along, and there's a lot of animosity there for various reasons. And my dad's side of the family is mostly Slovak, and it turned out a little Lithuanian after the fact. Shh, it's a bad secret. And there was a big deal made about the Slovak ancestry, but I really loved hearing about the Hungarian ancestry, and the Slovak side of the family was a little harsh about it because of what happened during the Anschluss and the area of Slovakia that got taken over by Hungary. And so Bela was my hero because he's Hungarian and he was a vampire and he was awesome. So when I was looking, I was like, and that's still in my heart. So I will tell anybody that there is no better Dracula than Bela Lugosi, period, end of story. Though there might be some better Dracula films out there.
I think that's a really good way of putting it. I think that is.
Yeah. It's not the best Dracula film, but he is the best Dracula.
Best Dracula.
And he set a precedent for every Dracula that was to come after him.
Yeah.
Even Sesame Street's the Count. Just so you know.
I have a soft spot in my heart for the Count. Like weirdly. Like I'm like, on. I love Count Von Count. And I think it's because I loved Bela Lugosi.
Probably.
Love him. So, you know. Just love him.
Again, this movie, much like what you said, Jenny, it's a comfort spot. You know, I want to watch something fun that means something to me. So I'll pick this one out of the Universal Monster movies. So it's my go-to among that whole series.
And it launched the whole Universal Monster.
I mean, there wouldn't be Universal Monsters if there wasn't a Dracula.
I mean, there were horror before that, obviously. We have Phantom of the Opera and stuff, but the actual Universal Monsters genre that then took off after and then evolved into or devolved, depending on how you want to look at it, into the Hammer films and so on and so forth throughout the ages. It started with this. And I guess not to, well, I mean, maybe to drive the point home, it really isn't the script. It really isn't, the movie. It's Bela. I'm just going to say it's Bela.
Bela.
The screenplay was a little weak. That's it. I'm not going to lie.
Although his "Listen to the Children of the Night, what beautiful music they make" is number 83 in the most 100 influential lines in all of cinema for AFI. So
as well it should be.
Absolutely. And of course they even reuse that line in Bram Stoker's Dracula by Coppola. So because it's such a good line. So
yeah.
So it's so good and so bad and so good.
Yes.
I just really wish that they had let him be more like seductive, because in my head he's way more seductive, but it's fine. I'll just keep it in my head.
Yeah.
I will say that this definitely started because I saw this early. I've been into vampires my whole life, and I'm positive this is why I love vampires and vampire stuff.
Yeah. Another weird fact, I don't know, I find this stuff interesting, probably because I'm geek and a nerd and just a whole bunch of levels of stuff. So obviously Bela Lugosi is not Bela's real name. Bela was Bela Ferenc Deso Blasco. Lugosi came from where he grew up. It was the city of Lugos, and it's now Romania. At the time it was Hungary, but around the same time where they were changing the borders, where like part of Slovakia became Hungary, part of Hungary became Romania. So that's interesting there. So Lugosi comes straight from Lugos. I found that really interesting too. Just
wasn't it like a misunderstanding when he came here that
I didn't read that. I thought it was something he did deliberately, but that doesn't mean that you're not right. When I was reading up on it, it said that he had taken the name Lugosi to Harold back to where he lived and grew up in Hungary, which is now Romania. But it could have been he had taken it because they, you know, messed it up, and instead of Bela from Lugosi, okay, Bela Lugosi.
Yeah.
But who knows? But by the time
Mm.
he immigrated, though, he came over from Germany, so I don't know if they would have.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how they did with immigration, if they went from the country of origin or country from where you were emigrating from.
They probably did origin.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I would have to.
So
I'd have to do a whole lot of research, and I'm not going to do it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. But if you want to, and you want to call us stupid for not knowing or whatever, hey, talk to us. But if
Let
you
us
start a
know.
fight, Betsy and Rebecca will kick your ass. That's
You just never know with me.
you
I'll
don't. I mean, they're
throw a
vicious.
cat at you and you'll get covered in cat hair.
Or I'll sick my wolf dog on you.
Oh yeah, him, the mean dog. He's so mean.
Sure.
Why do you keep that
Right.
vicious hound?
It's fun.
I get it.
Meanwhile, I don't. Do we have any final thoughts? I think we kind of got out what we can, but please, if you have more and you want to share before we end
I really
this
just,
fun trip.
but much like what we said, the movie's a comfort movie. Just keep a copy around for whenever you want to watch it.
Yep.
So
I heart Bella.
yeah, it's like I heart Bela. But yeah, with that, thanks for watching. Watch Dracula and worship Bela Lugosi as you should. And
Listen to
thank you for watching. Yeah. No. Oh yeah, don't forget Bela Lugosi's
Bela
Dead. Excellent
Lugosi's
songs like
Dead.
My House. Very good song. Also played in The Hunger, which is a pretty good vampire movie. Not a Dracula movie, but a good vampire movie. Has David Bowie in it as an added bonus. So there you go. But yeah, so I'm Jenny. Thanks for watching.
All right, Rebecca, thanks for tuning in.
Betsy.
You have been listening to the Girls Go Schools podcast. You can follow us on Facebook or Instagram at Girls Go Schools podcast, on Twitter at Girls Ghost Pod. Like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Girls Go Schools podcast, and find our podcast on your favorite podcatcher.